He slid a wedding contract across the table with a rule printed in red ink: no romantic involvement. She was a secretary until her boss turned their lies into real love. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy cinematic love stories where truth and justice always find their way, please subscribe and tap the notification bell. Tell me where you are watching from in the comments. I love hearing from you. All right, let us return to our main character. The city was drowning in rain that night. Wind swept between the glass towers of Midtown Manhattan, carrying the hum of traffic and the hiss of tires against wet asphalt. Inside the top floor of Hale and Company, the lights glowed low and golden, reflecting off polished marble and the rain streaking down the windows. Ava Nguyen stood there, soaked from the storm, her thin coat clinging to her arms. She looked out of place among the leather chairs and cold steel. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the strap of her worn purse. She had just finished another 14-hour day, typing reports, running errands, keeping up with everyone's demands but her own. Behind the long glass desk sat Ethan Hale, 33, the youngest CEO in the company's history, brilliant, composed, and unreadable. His suit was tailored, his voice even quieter than the thunder outside. "Ava," he said, sliding a black folder toward her. The gold letters on the cover read, "Marriage Agreement." "I need you to hear this before you say no." She blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. "A marriage agreement?" "Yes," he said simply. "For 90 days." The clock ticked. Somewhere, lightning cracked over the skyline. "I know this sounds insane," he continued, his tone still calm, "but it is the only way to protect both of us. The board is pushing for an image of stability before the merger closes next quarter. They want a family man. You are the only person I trust enough to keep this discreet." Ava laughed softly, disbelief mixing with exhaustion. "You are asking your secretary to marry you? That is your big solution?" "I am offering you a contract," Ethan said. "Everything is outlined. Your mother's medical debt gone. Your brother's tuition paid in full. You will have legal counsel, financial security, and your own room. It ends after 90 days. Clean and simple." She stared at him, rain dripping from her hair onto the marble floor. The offer sounded unreal, but so did her life lately. Late rent notices, hospital bills, and a second job that barely covered groceries. Ethan pushed a pen across the desk. It gleamed under the light, engraved with the single letter H. "Clause 7.2, he said, his expression unreadable. "No romantic involvement. This is strictly business." Ava looked down at the paper, her name already typed beneath the signature line. For a long moment, she could only hear the steady beat of rain against glass. Every instinct screamed that this was madness, but so was letting her mother's oxygen machine be turned off because she could not pay. Her hand hovered above the pen. "Why me?" she whispered. Ethan leaned back, his gaze steady. "Because you are the only one who has never lied to me." That stopped her cold. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, she had never asked for more than her paycheck. Lightning flashed again, turning the room white for a heartbeat. Ava took a slow breath, her pulse hammering in her throat. She picked up the pen, its weight heavier than it looked, and signed her name with shaking fingers. When she set it down, Ethan's expression softened for the first time. "Welcome to the arrangement, Mrs. Hale." Outside, thunder rolled through the night. Inside, Ava stood still, half terrified, half relieved, knowing that nothing about her life would ever be the same again. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky over Manhattan was still the color of ash. Ava woke in her small apartment, the faint hum of traffic below blending with the slow rhythm of her thoughts. The signed contract lay on her nightstand, its pages still slightly curled from the moisture of her hands. She stared at it for a long time, the bold letters of her new name, Ava Hale, echoing in her mind like a stranger's voice. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Driver will pick you up at 10. Pack lightly. You will move into the penthouse today." She sat up, pressing her palms against her face. Every rational part of her brain whispered that it was too late to turn back. She had made a deal with a man whose world was made of glass and steel, a place where everything was perfect except the people inside it. By the time she reached the entrance of Hale Tower, the city had shaken off the last of the storm. The marble lobby gleamed under fluorescent lights. People in suits passed her, nodding respectfully, already treating her differently. The driver led her to a private elevator, and when the doors opened at the top floor, she stepped into a space that felt like another planet. The penthouse stretched across the entire skyline, walls of glass, clean lines, quiet luxury. It smelled faintly of cedar and espresso. In the distance, Ethan stood near the grand piano, sleeves rolled up, reading a document. He looked up when she entered, his expression polite but measured. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," he said. The title made her flinch. "It feels strange to hear that." "It will for a while," he replied. "But the board meeting is tomorrow. We will need to appear convincing." He gestured to a table where a new folder waited. Inside were neatly printed pages, 5 clear rules. Rule 1. No romantic involvement. Rule 2. Appear together at 5 major public events. Rule 3. Separate bedrooms. Rule 4. Non-disclosure of all private details. Rule 5. After 90 days, either party may terminate without consequence. At the bottom was his signature, clean and controlled. Beside it, a space for hers. Ava set the pen down after signing. "You really think anyone will believe this is real?" Ethan's gaze softened slightly. "People believe what looks consistent. Appearances build trust more than truth does." There was no arrogance in his tone, only exhaustion, the voice of a man who had learned to survive behind precision. He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring. For the public," he said. "It is not real gold. I thought that would feel less heavy." She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which made her wonder just how carefully he had planned every detail. Later, the staff arrived, a stylist, a speech coach, a discreet photographer. Within hours, Ava's wardrobe transformed from thrift shop blouses to tailored elegance. Her reflection in the mirror startled her. The woman looking back wore confidence like perfume, but underneath, her pulse still raced. Ethan stood behind her in the reflection, his tie slightly loosened. "You look like someone the board will not question. And you look like someone who does not sleep," she said before she could stop herself. He smiled faintly, the first real hint of warmth since the night before. "Sleep is overrated." That evening, she explored the penthouse. Her bedroom overlooked the East River. The view was breathtaking, but the silence was louder. On the kitchen counter, she found a handwritten note in his precise script. "Dinner at 7. Practice starts tomorrow." At exactly 7, they sat opposite each other at a long dining table. The meal was perfect, plated by a chef she had not seen. The city lights shimmered through the glass walls. "This is going to work," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to her. "It has to." Ava studied him for a long moment. "And what happens when the 90 days are over?" He looked at her then, really looked, as if he had never considered that far ahead. "We go back to who we were before." Ava nodded slowly. "And if that is impossible?" Ethan did not answer. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent, as two people who had signed away their hearts sat in the glow of a deal that had already begun to feel dangerously real. Days turned into a rhythm that felt almost rehearsed. Each morning, the sun spilled over the city skyline, lighting the glass walls of the penthouse like fire. Ava learned the pace of her new life, measured steps, polite smiles, and perfectly timed appearances beside Ethan. Everything was calculated, from the way she greeted the board members to the way she stood beside him in photographs. The first public event came faster than she expected. It was a charity gala hosted by Hale and Company to raise funds for educational programs. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and quiet power. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and voices carried the soft arrogance of wealth. Ethan arrived with Ava on his arm, his usual composure intact. "You will be fine," he murmured under his breath as they stepped out of the car. "Just remember to breathe." "I am fine," she said, but her hand trembled against his sleeve. Inside, the crowd turned as they entered. The murmurs began. "Who is she? How did the CEO finally marry?" Ava held her posture, smiled as she had practiced, and let Ethan guide her through a sea of curious faces. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. She shook hands, repeated polite lines, and remembered every name he had drilled into her the night before. But as they stood for a photo call, a journalist, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, approached. "Mr. Hale," the reporter said loudly, "how does it feel to have found love so quickly after your previous engagement?" The words hit like ice water. Ethan's expression froze. The flashbulbs exploded around them, and for a brief second, his breathing faltered. Ava saw his hand twitch at his side, the same rhythm she had seen once before when he was anxious. Without thinking, she slipped her hand into his and whispered, 4, 7, 8. He inhaled. He held. He exhaled. The tremor eased. Then she turned to the reporter, her voice calm but firm. "Love is not measured by time," Ava said. "It is measured by how two people face the world together. Tonight, that is what matters." There was a pause, then scattered applause. The reporter's smile faded as another camera clicked. Ethan looked down at her, surprise flickering behind his eyes. Later that night, the car ride back to the penthouse was quiet. The city outside was a blur of lights and rain, but inside, the silence felt almost fragile. "You saved me," he said finally. "You just forgot to breathe," she replied softly. When they reached the penthouse, Ethan stopped by the piano. The same sheet of music still rested there, unfinished. "I used to play when I could not think," he said. "But I stopped. It felt indulgent." "Play," Ava said. "Even a few notes." He hesitated, then sat down. His fingers brushed the keys, and the first notes rose into the air, hesitant, searching. Ava stood nearby, arms folded, watching the man who had once seemed made of stone. "Do you miss it?" she asked. He looked up at her. "Every day." The melody faded, unfinished again. But this time, it did not sound like an ending. Over the next week, they appeared together at more events. Each one felt easier. Ethan's calm returned, and Ava began to see glimpses of the man behind the title, quiet, thoughtful, sometimes lost in his own silence. One night, after a long day of meetings, Ava found him standing by the window, staring out at the city. "You should rest," she said. He turned, his expression unreadable. "When you stand there beside me, people look at me differently. They see something I have not been in years, human." Ava felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. "Maybe they are just seeing who you were all along." He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Or maybe they are just seeing you." The clock ticked softly in the background. The air between them shifted, something quiet, unspoken, but real. Neither of them said another word. The city outside kept moving, but inside that glass tower, something delicate had begun to form, an understanding neither contract nor clause could define. The morning after the gala, sunlight filtered through the penthouse curtains, soft and gold. Ava stood in the kitchen, pouring tea into 2 porcelain cups. The air smelled faintly of chamomile and rain. She had barely slept. Every image from the night before replayed in her mind, the flashing cameras, the whispered questions, the way Ethan's hand had tightened in hers when he almost lost control. When Ethan entered, he looked different, less guarded, less polished. His tie hung loose, and the sleeves of his shirt were rolled to his elbows. "You did well last night," he said. "The board was impressed. They said you made me look stable." Ava gave a tired smile. "Glad to be of service." He reached for a cup of tea, his fingers brushing hers for a second longer than necessary. The moment passed, but the silence that followed carried weight. "There is something I have not said," he began. "I owe you an apology. This arrangement. I thought it would be simple, but I underestimated how much I have asked of you." "You do not need to apologize," she said softly. "You needed help, and I agreed." Ethan studied her for a moment. "Yes, but I did not realize you would become the reason people stopped questioning me. You make this company look alive again." The words struck something deep in her. "I am just pretending, remember?" He hesitated. "Maybe I am the one pretending now." Ava turned away, her heart thudding too loudly. "Do not say things like that. makes it harder to remember what this is. That afternoon, the penthouse was filled with stylists, assistants, and planners preparing for the next event, the Hale Foundation's annual press dinner. Ava was to sit beside Ethan on stage, smiling through speeches and interviews. She dressed in a silver gown chosen by the image consultant, elegant yet modest. When Ethan saw her, something unreadable flickered across his face. At the dinner, everything went smoothly until one of the senior investors approached the table. "Mr. Hale," the man said, shaking Ethan's hand, "it is good to finally see you happy again. Your wife is charming." "You are a lucky man." Ethan's lips curved into a polite smile, but his gaze lingered on Ava. "Yes," he said quietly, "I am." The compliment should have rolled off her, but it did not. She felt her pulse quicken, her throat tighten. For the first time, the lie they had built together felt dangerously close to truth. Later that night, after the guests left and the staff cleared the tables, Ava found herself alone in the ballroom. The chandeliers dimmed, and her reflection shimmered in the glass wall. She slipped off her heels and exhaled, exhaustion catching up with her. "Still standing?" Ethan's voice echoed softly from behind. He had removed his jacket, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "Barely," she said, smiling faintly. "My feet might never forgive me." He walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "You handled tonight perfectly." "Thank you," she said. "Though I am starting to think I was not hired for my secretarial skills anymore." He chuckled quietly, the sound rare but warm. "Maybe not. Maybe you were chosen for your ability to keep me from falling apart in public." The joke landed softly, but the air between them shifted again. The sound of rain began against the glass, gentle, steady. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "I used to think control was strength," he said. "Now I am not so sure." Ava looked up at him, her heart pounding. "Then what is it?" "Maybe it is allowing someone else to see you when you are not in control." The words hung there, fragile and dangerous. She did not move, afraid that any breath would break whatever was happening. For a brief moment, the world outside seemed to disappear, the contracts, the rules, the 90 days. There was only the sound of rain, and the truth neither of them dared to name. Then Ethan stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good night, Ava." "Good night, Ethan." When he left, Ava remained by the window, watching the city lights blur through the rain. Somewhere, deep inside, she already knew that pretending had ended the moment he looked at her that way. The following week began with chaos. The headlines spread faster than rain across glass. Hale CEO faces insider scandal. Ethan's board was in uproar, his rivals circling like sharks. The company's upcoming merger trembled on the edge of collapse. Ava watched from her desk as the tension rippled through the office. Assistants whispered, calls came and went, and every glance carried the same silent question: how much longer could Ethan keep control? That night, the penthouse lights burned late. Ethan sat at the table, surrounded by stacks of reports, his jaw tight. "Veronica," he muttered under his breath. "She leaked the numbers." Ava hesitated in the doorway. "Can it be fixed?" He looked up, exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "Not yet. She wants to force me out before the merger. The only thing keeping the board from turning is our image. This marriage has to look stronger than ever." The words landed heavy. Ava nodded, though something in her chest twisted. "Then we make them believe," she said. The next evening, they attended the annual board gala, an event meant to project unity and success. The ballroom glowed gold and white, filled with executives, reporters, and too much champagne. Cameras flashed as Ethan and Ava entered together, hand in hand. At first, everything went according to plan. They smiled, danced, answered polite questions. But midway through the evening, Veronica appeared elegant, confident, and cruel. She approached them with the calculated grace of someone who knew she was about to strike. "Ava," she said sweetly, "you have adapted well. It must be strange playing wife to a man who never believed in marriage." Ava froze, but Ethan's voice cut through, low and cold. "Enough, Veronica." "Oh, come now," Veronica said, smirking. "You think the truth will stay buried?" Everyone knows you married her for the board vote. They will know soon enough. The flash of a camera exploded nearby. The room fell silent for a beat. Then, with perfect composure, Ava reached for Ethan's hand. She turned to Veronica and smiled. "Maybe you are right," she said evenly. "Maybe it began as business, but even the coldest contracts can turn into something living when people learn to trust each other." Her words rippled through the crowd. Reporters whispered, guests exchanged glances, and Veronica's smirk faltered. Ethan looked at Ava, something unreadable in his eyes, part gratitude, part awe. The rest of the night passed in a blur of applause and whispers. When the last guest left, Ethan stood by the piano, silent. Ava approached quietly. "You did not have to protect me like that," he said. "I was not protecting you," she replied. "I was protecting what we built. Even if it started as pretend, it deserves honesty now." He looked at her, really seeing her, the woman who had risked her dignity for his name, the one who never asked for more than truth. Slowly, he sat at the piano and began to play. The same unfinished melody filled the room, soft and uncertain. "Finish it," Ava said quietly. He glanced up, smiling faintly. "Only if you stay and listen." She sat beside him. The melody grew fuller, steadier. When the final note faded, neither spoke. The silence that followed felt like a confession neither of them needed to say aloud. Later, as Ava prepared to leave the room, Ethan's voice stopped her. "You once asked what happens after 90 days, he said. "Maybe the answer depends on what we become in the meantime." She turned toward him, heart beating faster. "And what are we now?" Ethan's reply was simple. "Something real enough to lose." That night, Ava lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, but the world outside felt suspended, quiet, waiting. The line between contract and connection had vanished. She had promised herself she would not fall for him, but love, like music, did not ask for permission. It simply filled the silence until there was no room for anything else. The days that followed blurred together in quiet tension. Ethan worked from dawn until long after midnight, his phone never leaving his hand. The scandal had not faded, it had simply gone silent, which was worse. Ava could see it in the tightness of his shoulders, the way he stared at the skyline as if waiting for another blow to land. She tried to focus on routine organizing his schedules, attending press meetings, smiling through questions, but something in their rhythm had changed. The air between them was charged, fragile, and full of words neither dared to speak. One evening, as the city lights flickered below, Ethan finally stepped away from his desk. He looked pale, the sharpness of exhaustion cutting through his features. Ava poured him a cup of tea, the same chamomile blend she had made for him since their first week together. "Drink," she said softly. "You need to stop for at least a moment." He accepted the cup, his hand brushing hers. "You sound like my conscience." "Maybe I am," she said. "Someone has to remind you that you are still human." He smiled faintly, but his eyes did not match the expression. "Humanity is a liability in my world, Ava. Every time I trust someone, it costs me." "Then why trust me?" she asked quietly. Ethan stared into his cup, then at her. "Because you are the only person who never wanted anything from me." For a long moment, neither moved. The only sound was the hum of the city through the glass. Then Ethan stood, walking toward the piano. "Do you remember what you said at the gala? That even the coldest contracts can turn into something living?" Ava nodded slowly. "I meant it." He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Then what happens when that living thing becomes too real?" Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He looked down, and the color drained from his face. "It is Veronica," he said. "She has proof. Emails, transfers, she is going to the press tomorrow morning." Ava felt her chest tighten. "Can she actually prove anything against you?" "No," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "But she can make it look like I manipulated the merger for personal gain. It will destroy everything we built." She took a breath, steady and calm. "Then we fight back. We do not hide." Ethan looked at her, torn between admiration and fear. "You should not have to be part of this." "I already am," Ava said firmly. You made me your partner in this lie, and somewhere along the way, it stopped being a lie for me." He froze. The words hung in the air, raw and undeniable. She looked away, embarrassed by her own honesty. "Ava," he said quietly, "do you regret it?" She met his eyes. "No, I just do not know where to put it now." The silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. Ethan set the cup down and crossed the room. For the first time, he reached for her hand, not as a performance, not as part of the deal, but as himself. "Then let me fix this," he said. "Not for the company, for you." Ava shook her head. "You do not owe me anything." He looked at her with quiet certainty. "Yes, I do, because you believed in me when no one else did." Outside, thunder rolled over the river. Inside, they stood in the half-light, two people who had started as strangers bound by a contract and now found themselves standing on the edge of something real, something terrifying, and something they could no longer control. Later that night, as Ethan worked to gather evidence, Ava watched him from the doorway. The glow from his computer painted his face in shades of determination and quiet pain. She knew then that whatever came next would change everything. The contract was almost over, but what bound them now had no signature and no expiration date. It was the one thing neither of them had planned for love that refused to remain a secret. The morning broke with gray light and a storm warning crawling across every news screen. Ava sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her phone, the silence of the penthouse heavy around her. Ethan had not come home the night before. He had gone to confront Veronica, determined to stop her before she leaked anything to the press. At 9 o'clock sharp, the first headline appeared online: "Hail CEO's Fake Marriage Exposed." Beneath it was a photo from the gala, Ethan holding Ava's hand, her smile frozen mid-flash, and a document watermarking the corner: "Confidential Marriage Contract." Ava felt her stomach twist. Every outlet picked it up within minutes. Reporters called non-stop. Her phone buzzed again, an internal memo from the board demanding Ethan's resignation and an emergency meeting by noon. When the elevator chimed, she turned sharply. Ethan stepped out, his suit soaked from rain, his expression hollow. "She did it," he said quietly. "Veronica sent everything to the press." Ava rose to her feet. "Then tell them the truth. Tell them why you did it." He shook his head. "They will not believe me." "To them, this just proves I will do anything to hold power. If I speak, I drag you down with me." "I do not care about that," Ava said, her voice trembling. "But you cannot let her destroy what you built." He looked at her for a long moment. "You mean what we built?" The words hit her harder than she expected. He stepped closer, the rain still clinging to his hair. "If I resign, the company survives. You can walk away free." Her throat tightened. "So that is it? You give up and disappear?" He exhaled, tired and defeated. "It is the only way to protect you." Ava's hands balled into fists. "Do not decide that for me, Ethan. You said you trusted me." "Then let me stand beside you now." For the first time, anger cracked through his calm. "You should not have to pay for my mistakes. And you should not face them alone," she answered. They stood in silence, the city roaring far below. Then, slowly, Ava reached into her bag and pulled out the folded contract, the same document now flashing across every news feed. She placed it on the table, beside his signature. "Maybe this started as a lie," she said, her voice steady, "but the way I feel about you never was." He looked down at the papers, then at her. "If I stay and fight, it will get worse before it gets better." "Then we fight," she said. "Together." Ethan's expression softened, something fragile breaking in his eyes. "Ava, you deserve more than this chaos." She smiled faintly. "Then give me something worth fighting for." He nodded slowly, the decision hardening in his posture. "There is a board meeting at noon." "I will not hide anymore." As thunder rolled through the skyline, Ethan reached for the contract, his hand brushing hers. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "no one writes the ending for us." And with that, they walked out together, stepping into a storm that would either end them or set them free. The boardroom was filled with the low hum of voices and the restless tapping of pens. Reporters waited outside the glass doors, their cameras trained on the hallway. Inside, Ethan stood at the head of the long table, rainwater still clinging to the edge of his coat. Ava sat near the end, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Every eye in the room was fixed on them. "Mr. Hale," the chairman said sharply, "the evidence is public. The leaked contract clearly proves this marriage was fabricated to manipulate company image. Do you deny it?" Ethan did not hesitate. "No," he said. "I signed that contract." The room rippled with murmurs. Ava felt her pulse quicken, but Ethan's voice stayed steady. "I signed it because I thought protecting this company's reputation mattered more than protecting the truth. I was wrong." The chairman's brow furrowed. "So you admit deception?" "I admit fear," Ethan replied. "Fear that honesty would cost me everything I worked for. But the woman sitting at that table reminded me that integrity is not something you can fake. You either live it or you lose it." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed emails and transaction records. "These," he continued, "show that Veronica Pierce manipulated internal accounts to trigger this scandal. She sold confidential data to our competitors and framed me to secure a controlling stake in the merger." Gasps spread across the room. The chairman took the documents, scanning them quickly. Ethan's tone never wavered. "For months, I allowed fear to make me silent. Today, I am done being silent." The doors opened suddenly. 2 compliance officers entered, followed by security. Veronica stood in the doorway, her confidence cracking as the officers approached. "This is a mistake," she said, but her voice trembled. "It is not," Ethan said quietly. "The mistake was trusting you." The officers led her out. The room fell into stunned silence. Then the chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, the board will review this evidence immediately. Until then, your suspension is lifted." Ethan nodded, but his eyes were on Ava. Slowly, he reached for the document lying in front of him, the original marriage contract that had started it all. The words Clause 7.2, no romantic involvement, glared up at him in red ink. He tore it clean down the middle. The sound echoed across the boardroom. "This clause," he said, his voice breaking the tension, "was my attempt to control what cannot be controlled. Love is not a liability. It is the only truth that survived this storm." He turned to Ava. "If there is a new agreement, I want to sign it with you. Not for the board, not for the cameras, just for us." Ava rose from her chair, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Then consider it signed," she whispered. The boardroom erupted in quiet applause. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and sunlight spilled across the city. For the first time in months, Ethan smiled, not as a CEO reclaiming his title, but as a man who had finally told the truth. 6 months later, spring sunlight poured over the rooftop garden of Hale and Company. The air smelled of jasmine and fresh rain. Rows of white chairs curved toward a small arch wrapped in ivy and pale roses. A handful of guests, close friends, board members, and a few quiet faces from the staff waited as soft piano music drifted through the air. Ethan stood at the front, his suit simple, his expression calm but full of something new piece. The same piano piece that had once been unfinished now played in full, his hands steady on the keys until the final note faded. When he turned, Ava was there, walking toward him in a dress the color of morning light, her mother's pendant resting against her heart. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to still. There were no reporters, no contracts, no clauses, just the echo of everything they had survived. When the officiant began to speak, Ethan reached for Ava's hands. "The first time I offered you a contract," he said softly, "it was out of fear. I was trying to buy control in a world that terrified me. But today, I am not offering you terms. I am offering you choice." Ava smiled, her eyes shining. "And I am choosing you, Ethan, not because I need saving, but because you finally learned how to stay." A gentle laugh rippled through the crowd. The officiant nodded, inviting them to exchange rings. Ethan slipped a simple band of gold onto her finger, the same one he had once called not real. Now it was solid, warm, and true. When they kissed, the city below erupted in light. Somewhere in the company lobby, a small glass case displayed the remains of their first contract, Clause 7.2 crossed out in gold, with a new line etched beneath. Love is the only agreement that never expires. Weeks later, Hale and Company launched a scholarship in Ava's name, dedicated to secretaries and assistants who dreamed of becoming executives. She visited the program every month, speaking about courage and second chances. Ethan often joined her quietly in the back row, listening with a kind of awe that words could not touch. At night, in the penthouse that no longer felt like glass and steel but like home, Ethan would play the piano while Ava read by the window. When the last note faded, she would look up and smile. Still afraid of losing control? She would tease. He would shake his head, smiling back. Not anymore, because the only thing I never planned for is the only thing that made me whole. Outside, the city pulsed with life again. And on the rooftop where it all began, a plaque gleamed under the sunlight, From Lies to Legacy. It was not the end of their story, only the proof that sometimes even a love born from a contract can become the most honest promise of all.